Ooh. Hey, what's going on? Welcome to tonight's show. We're back again for week 2 of 31 days of Halloween. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how I'm getting through 31 days of Halloween this year. I'm not really I'm not terribly in the mood to watch horror movies. I mean, I kind of am. I fluctuate. I fluctuate between this mania to read the news, and then I need to turn my brain off and just watch horror movies, and I go back and forth like that. It's kind of weird when the news is horror and your comfort blanket, favorite thing to do is to watch horror movies. They can conflict sometimes. That's the issue. So, I don't know, man. It's just been a real mixed bag. I'm really trying to push through and complete. I always want to do the things that I say I'm going to do, or at least to the best of my ability. I said I was going to do this, and so I'm trying. We're trying here at the Frumess channel to make good on that. You've noticed that I'm actually putting up each individual movie as its own episode, so we're kind of doing half and half of when we talked about in our kickoff show. Did not get to as many movies this week either as I did last week. The first week 1, I watched 10 horror movies. I felt pretty good about that. That was pretty good right out of the gate. And then this week I only watched 7. So we lost out on 3. In terms of total tallies thus far, so out of the 17 total movies, 4 of them have been revisits, which is really good. I always want to keep my revisit ratio to new watch ratio. I want the revisits to be small. We don't want too many revisits. I mean, a revisit here and there is good, but it's always good to break new ground and watch stuff that you haven't seen. What's up, crazy white boy? Aaron is here. Hello, Aaron. So here's how it's going to work. I'm going to talk about my watch picks, the things that I chose to watch this week. And then anybody who is here who feels like checking in and talking about what they, or drop in the live chat what you've been watching, and we can talk about it a little bit, and then we'll brush on out of here. Okay. So that is if you want to. So I'll go through. I'm going to do what I did last time. Now, if you've been following my reviews in the community tab, that's not the full review. That's just a little, sort of guideline for what I want to say. I have more to say on each movie. So if you watch the actual segmented reviews, you'll notice they're a little bit longer, a little bit more, they're a little bit more elaborate. So with that said, let us jump right into it with week 2. Let me find my little week 2. We got Biz in the house. I see Biz is here. Here is now remember last time I mentioned my my Letterboxd. Come follow me on Letterboxd if you want to keep up with what I'm watching or not. You can find the link in the description. This is where I log every movie that I watch is logged here on Letterboxd. Okay. I don't write reviews for every single thing that I watch. Sometimes I just rate them. I do rate movies. I try to be fair. Sometimes honesty hurts, but neither here nor there. So, all right, let's dive right into it, shall we? Okay. So, Evilspeak from 1981. Oh man, finally caught this on Shudder. Evilspeak is a title that has loomed in my to-watch queue for close to 20 years in one form or another. When I worked at Sam Goody, there were 2 boxes that I always saw whenever I was digging through stuff or looking at stuff. One of them was Dead Heat with Treat Williams and Joe Piscopo, which is a really great movie. Highly, highly recommend that movie, which also has Vincent Price in it. The cover art is terrible and does not accurately depict what is in that movie, nor what that movie is what's really going on. And the other film I used to see all the time was Evilspeak. And I knew it starred Clint Howard. I knew Clint Howard from Rock and Roll High School, amongst other things. Clint Howard is one of the greatest character actors of all time. He is just in every B movie you can imagine. You always are going to have a little smile creep up on your face when you see Clint Howard. He's the brother of Ron Howard. He's in all of Ron Howard's movies as well. Brother Ron Howard was, what's his face, on Happy Days. And he was on, oh God, what was that? The Griffin Show. Andy Griffin Show is where he got his start. This is one of the only times where he actually starred in a movie. There are two horror movies where you have Clint Howard as the star. The first one is Evilspeak, and then in the 90s he did Ice Cream Man. Although I would say of the two, Evilspeak is far more coherent film than Ice Cream Man, which is not very coherent at all. After finally giving it a spin, I really do feel like kicking myself for sleeping on this absolutely bonkers film for so long. I mean, this film really is nutter butters. I mean, there's so much crazy stuff going on. As I mentioned before, this is what I wrote. I had a similar feeling when I finally watched Dead Heat for the first time. The poster art that you can see right here for Evilspeak, I don't know if you can see it that well. It's right here in the corner. The poster art for Evilspeak really does this movie justice. You're somehow paradoxically know what you are getting, as well as can't possibly imagine what is coming. And particularly the last 15 minutes is when the movie truly crescendos into madness. It starts off with your typical like witchcraft, like here the Satanist from 300 years ago, and then somehow this Satanist, he winds up in a computer program. And this is 1981. This is at like the dawn of personal computing, right? Like, the very, very beginning, like Apple and Macintosh are relatively new. So, I mean, this must have seemed so high tech for like 1981 and whatnot. And you have this guy, Stanley Coopersmith, he's at this academy, this army academy. And he gets really into this computer program. Oh no, you know what he does? He finds a book. That's right, the book. He finds this book and he's translating the Latin through the computer. That's what it is. The computer is a translator. And then, it basically, the computer kind of gets possessed and via Evilspeak from that Latin and whatnot. And eventually Coopersmith, he's kind of like a Carrie White sort of figure, like from the movie Carrie, from the Stephen King story. He's like an oddball wallflower type of guy who gets bullied and picked on, as happens in these sorts of situations. And eventually he just sort of syncs up with this computer and gets possessed by the priest or whatever, who's actually kind of like a pig demon. There's like a weird like pig demon monster that like takes him over for a minute, or like is like inhabiting his body and whatnot. And we get utter madness. Okay. We get an army of man-eating hell hogs. That's the only way to describe them. There are these demonic pigs that come out of the floor and like they eat people and they eat women, naked women showering, naked girls showering. We also, as I mentioned, there are satanic computers laden with super early CGI that holds up pretty well. It holds up pretty well. Kind of like if there was CGI in the original Star Wars, when Mon Mothma or whatever is showing the rebels how to penetrate the Death Star. It's kind of like 2 steps up from that, and it holds up pretty well. And of course, the best of all, we get crazy haired Clint Howard. So Clint Howard as Coopersmith, his hair is like standing up on end. This is after he's become possessed and he's being suspended by wires, clearly, but he's just floating in the air and he's wielding a sword and he floats around just chopping off heads. And it's just, like I said, it's a Carrie fueled frenzy, man. I feel like if Glenn Danzig saw this movie, he would absolutely fucking love it. Maybe he has. I bet he would love it. This would be, if Glenn was reviewing this movie, like he reviewed all those movies for Flipside, this would check off all of Glenn's boxes. And like I said, it's just really nice that Clint Howard is front and center as the star instead of, shining as a character actor. I really think this could have been a franchise with Cooper Smith as some sort of like Freddie, Michael, Jason, Chucky character. And yeah, it just would have been great. It really, really would have been great. Yes, yes, Matt, John, Demon Pigs. That's right. My father was a boar. So yeah, so I can't recommend this enough, man. It's great. It's on Shudder. Everybody go check it out. I think it's on Tubi TV as well. So go give Evilspeak a watch. Just a really, really good time. I gave this one 3.5 stars. Before we continue and move further, I just want to get our sponsorship out of the way. Riot Stickers is a sponsor of the Frumess channel. Riot Stickers cover all your stickering needs. If you need stickers, you go to riotstickers.com. We have a special deal going with them. As many of you know, these stickers, they're printed on vinyl. They have a UV coating that protects them from the sun, and you can get 1,000 of them for $79 at the link down in the description. That's riotstickers.com/Frumess. You can't beat this deal. Riotstickers.com. It's the only way to go for your stickering needs. Man, have you ever seen the reds on Riot stickers maintain in the outdoor elements, sun in, sun out? I mean, red is the first color to go, and yet with Riot stickers, it remains, it maintains. That's how it goes for riotstickers.com. Link down in the description. We'll be right back with more Halloween 31 Days of Horror reviews.
Posters and promo cards, there's nothing we can't print for you. From stage backdrops to bass drum heads, we can print on shirts, we can print on hats, we can print on pants. Cheap prices and high quality, quick turnaround times and free shipping. We also offer free artwork support, great customer service, and so much more. We are the bomb. Riotstickers.com. Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. Riotstickers.com. Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. Riotstickers.com. Riot Stickers, we are the bomb.
That's right. Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. All right. This movie is called Phantom of the Mall, Eric's Revenge. And a quick shout out to friend of the channel and friend of Frumess, Kevin45, aka Kevin Von Spear, who loves Phantom things. I'm sure he's seen this movie before. I'll have to ask him the next time I speak to him. This is from 1989, and this is, much like Evilspeak, this is another watch that has languished in my queue for far too long. I almost purchased it. It was this poster art that you see over here. This was redone. This was beautiful poster art. Really made me want to watch the movie on a whole other level when Arrow did their re-release of Phantom of the Mall. And it just, man, that Arrow video art looked too damn good to keep passing this up. And, I was glad to finally give it a chance. Watching this, I was reminded of how integral mall culture used to be at its height in the late 80s and through the mid 90s. It was like the universe for all teenagerdom. You know what I mean? And if you're going to update and adapt the story of Phantom of the Opera, of course, which this is based on, it makes perfect sense for it to be in a mall type setting if you're making this film in 1989. Additionally, here's a fun fact for you. This is the same mall that is used in Shopping Mall, which we previously watched and reviewed. And you can totally tell, man. So I think it's really perfect for a double feature. Hey, Jody Ramone, how are you? Thank you for the skulls. Thank you. Much appreciated. Yeah, man, we like the mall. That was it. That was the center of everything in life. And so this movie does a great job of calling that back, like the fondness for the mall. And it's interesting how the mall, the mall is the perfect anchorage for this, in the same way that in the 70s, when Brian De Palma made one of my favorite films of all time, Phantom of the Paradise, which was a rock venue, was essentially the same as the mall. So like, they use the term Xanadu for Swan in Phantom of the Paradise, and that is kind of like what the mall is in this movie. It is like a Xanadu in a way, a little bit. You also have, well, let me read on here. Eric as the Phantom almost doubles as a superhero, and kind of reminds me of Sam Raimi's Darkman. So Darkman came out like a year later, and that was like Sam Raimi's attempt to sort of make an original superhero film. Like, it had a bigger budget. It really, it was Sam Raimi taking all of his like Evil Dead aesthetic and like upping the game and trying to tell a superhero story. And of course, we know that he would get the chance to do it again almost a decade and 2 years later with Spider-Man, and blow everybody's face off when he did it. But he did it the first time he did it with Darkman, which also shares a lot of, DNA with Phantom of the Opera. Darkman himself is very much like the Phantom, and he even wears this like duster, and he has bandages instead of a mask. In this case, in this movie, and Eric is the character in the actual story, the literature and whatnot. Eric's mask is taken from a mannequin. He breaks a mannequin head and puts the broken piece over his face. So that kind of works. And then he kind of becomes like a superhero a little bit. The reason why I bring up Darkman in the first place is because watching Phantom of the Mall made me realize that Darkman 2 is heavily inspired by Phantom of the Opera, because I was noticing those parallels, and I just can't believe that I never noticed that before. I also noticed that Eric talks with a deep robotic voice, and it reminds me very much of Winslow Leach from Phantom of the Paradise. When he's as the Phantom Phoenix. It's just a really great addition. I really like it. Eventually, Eric does kind of take an evil turn. I mean, the Phantom is not a protagonist. He's an antagonistic character for the most part. I don't think there's really I guess maybe the female, the lady, the woman, whatever, the girl, the whoever plays the girl archetype is always like kind of probably the closest thing to the protagonist. In this case, the Swan character, and mind you, this movie, Phantom of the Mall, as well as Phantom of the Paradise, all of them are sort of adaptations of an adaptation of Phantom of the Opera. So you have the 1925 Phantom of the Opera, but then in the 40s, I think it was, you had the Universal Phantom of the Opera, and that's the story that's the different story where the music is stolen from the Phantom, and he's locked up in the attic, and blah, blah, blah. All that stuff comes from the Universal version. It's not the same as the Phantom of the Opera, the silent one from 1925 that is super famous and that everybody knows. And so you get that character, that antagonistic character, the Swan-like character who steals. In this case, he steals land from Eric's parents as he commits arson, is the guy who owns the mall, and his son. I forget his name. I don't even remember his name is. But in any case, there's just a lot of tie-in, and I like it. Eventually, though, yes, Eric does turn evil. We get a lot of flashback. It's funny. I forgot what we were talking about. Oh, remember we were talking about the adaptation of Frankenstein, the angry black girl and her monster. And I was talking about how Chris, who's like the Frankenstein character, he doesn't have a lot of pathos. We could have used some flashbacks with him to really get to know him a little bit better. And in this movie, we do get that. We get that very thing that I was sort of craving, and we get it in the form of Eric having flashbacks with his girlfriend when he was still alive, before he was scarred, hideously scarred and whatnot. So Eric takes a turn. He eventually, he gets catches fire. He jumps off a whole thing, and I don't know. There's this whole conspiracy about taking over Eric's family's house so they can build the mall. And what's funny is working in the mall is a super youthful pre-Weasel Pauly Shore. It's right before Encino Man, and Pauly Shore, he works at a yogurt stand, and he's kind of like the comic relief, but he also plays a straight sidekick in the last third of the movie, as he abandons his habit of leaving gummy body parts in the frozen yogurt. And also, additionally, the guy who burns down Eric's house turns out to be Mac's dad from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And if he didn't get humorously crushed in the story, like dies, you could totally link the two in continuity with this film being the reason why Mac's dad is in jail. It would totally friggin' work, man. That like, oh, he went to jail because he committed arson, used to be the small security guard. I would have loved that. That would have been great. That would have totally worked. We get some real, as I mentioned before, there's some great kung fu that just comes out of nowhere. Like the Phantom character, Eric, he is really good at kung fu for unexplained, for inexplicably, he is great at kicking ass kung fu style. And yeah. So that's streaming right now on Shudder. Check it out if you are interested. I gave it 3 stars. Okay, let's move on to the next movie. Ah, yes. Mars Attacks from 1996. Directed by the great Tim Burton. I love Tim Burton. We don't talk a lot about Tim Burton on this channel, but let me just say I friggin' love Tim Burton. I think I've seen every single Tim Burton movie at least once. And, you know, the rule of Tim Burton is, here's the rule to Tim Burton movies. If it is an original story, it's going to be pretty good. And if it's something that is an existing kind of IP, it's going to be lacking in some way, or it's not going to be as good. Case in point, Planet of the Apes, the Alice in Wonderland, Dark Shadows. Oh, the thing about Tim Burton is, it's not always the case, but Tim is all about style over substance. He is, and he's great in that regard. He very much gravitates towards certain story elements or certain things. And sometimes he chases these story elements, or he chases these stylistic things at the expense of the film as a whole, like story included. Now, that's not to say that there are exceptions to these rules. I mean, but look at it. Look at like Beetlejuice. Again, I just mentioned Planet of the Apes. Planet of the Apes looks amazing, beautifully shot, and the production design is gorgeous, but the story is atrocious. And the same can be said for Dark Shadows, which looks really great, but the story is just, you know. But then you have stuff where, like, you know, he's done biopic stuff that's fantastic. I mean, Ed Wood is his best movie. That's my favorite Tim Burton movie. So yeah, I mean, that's not an exact science, but you know, here we go. We got Mars Attacks, which, by the way, is it's based on a trading card game. Okay. Or it's based on the collectible trading cards, but there's no, I mean, that's where like the visuals come from, where the Martian designs come from, but you know, there's no actual, the story is an original story. And so in that example, it also really holds up. I always have loved Mars Attacks. But this revisit took it to a whole nother level for me. As a 38-year-old man, I mean, I always watched it. When I watched it when I was younger, there were things about it that I really liked, and there were things about it that I found frustrating. Like, I just thought like that just didn't work. And I think part of the problem was I just didn't understand how campy it was. I was watching it from like a very serious point of view. I was watching it as a very serious science fiction film. I know that sounds kind of ridiculous when you think about Mars Attacks, because it's a comedy. I mean, it is a comedy. It's like a science fiction black comedy, loaded, oozing oozing with camp, you know. But for 38-year-old Jeff, my viewing palette, it ticked off every box. I mean, it was great. And the reason why it used to frustrate me, I was mentioning how I was watching it. I never noticed how the tone shifts, kind of like a frog sitting in a pot of water that is gradually increasing in temperatures. You know that they have that thing they talk about that where like the frog, you put a frog in a boiling pot. I don't know why anybody would want to do this. I guess it has to do with the fact that the frog is cold-blooded, and when you as you heat up the water, the frog doesn't notice its body heating up. You know what I mean? And the frog causes the frog to boil into the pot of water without wanting to jump out because it can't notice it. So the point being is I felt the same way watching and not understanding, and when I was younger, that the tone shifts in a similar way. You know, the tone at the beginning of the film is firmly rooted in real, and I put that in quotes, REEL, like real, not REAL, which is a completely different kind of real. That would be like real life, like realism. Real, REEL, is like movie realness. You know what I mean? So it felt firmly rooted in real, REEL, life, come quirky sci-fi, very much akin to Burton's dry humor in Edward Scissorhands. So, you know, that's the thing about Burton's humor, man. He's like, you know, his humor, he's a really good understanding of comedy, you know. And by the way, just to go back for a second, talk about like, you know, style over substance, and you know, if there's source material, if it's IP, it's not going to be the story suffers. I mean, case in point, look at Batman and Batman Returns, both incredible masterpieces that I have endless love for, but the stories suffer because Burton is so like he's so magnetized to certain elements in the first movie. There's really no plot to the story at all. We've talked, Bob Rose and I have talked about this in our Batman podcast. Go check that out on the channel. But like, you know, not like nothing really happens in the first Batman movie. Like that's like a weird thing to say in Batman. Of course things happen, lots of things happen, but there's no like driving narrative to it, you know. And in the second one, you know, the only person that really has an arc, the two people that have an arc are the villains, man. The villains have arcs. You know, Batman is kind of just existing. You know, he's already Batman, and he doesn't really change from the beginning to the end of the movie. There's no, you know, change for him. It's the Penguin that changes. It's Catwoman that changes. And so like that's his fundamental like flaw with certain things, that he gets so like wrapped up into that in that kind of way. But in a movie like Edward Scissorhands, the humor is so dry that it gives you cotton mouth. And it's the best. It's the best kind of dry humor that you could want in a movie. The movie takes itself incredibly seriously, but at the same time is like you can't help but laugh at it. And so it's like that kind of dry black humor that is just rampant in Mars Attacks. And eventually it devolves from that place. It devolves from that place and just gets sillier and sillier and goofier and more slapstick. And by the end, it's just it's like a ball of yarn that's come undone. And it's wonderful. It's great. But by the end, you literally have Tom Jones dancing with animals in the woods and the Tahoe caves, singing "It's Not Unusual." You have Martians in the chorus as replacing the chorus girls. You know what I mean? It devolves, but in a great kind of way. As I mentioned here, and by the end, Tim has soaked his ode to War of the Worlds by Ed Wood in the kitschiest of camp, because it just gets so campy that it almost collapses in on itself. And that's really what what this is. My favorite Tim Burton movie is Ed Wood for many, many reasons. One of them being that I'm a filmmaker and I love making movies, and I love that this is such a love letter to a guy, Ed Wood, who was so passionate about making movies. He didn't let anything stop him, and he's widely considered one of the worst directors of all time. And he's just just I don't know what else to say about him. He's just like an iconoclast in his own right, Ed Wood, truly a punk rock spirit, a punk rock independent spirit. So, like I said, so in my review here, I say one of them is the great love and respect that Burton holds for someone who has been given the laughable title. Sorry, my favorite Tim Burton. Sorry, let me reread this because I just totally screwed this up. My favorite Tim Burton film is Ed Wood for many reasons. One of those reasons, that's what I meant to say. One of those reasons is the great love and respect that Tim Burton holds for Ed Wood, who had been given the laughable title of the director of the worst movie ever made. And it's laughable. There's so many worse movies out there. To call Plan 9 the worst movie ever made, I mean, it's a bad movie, but there's lots of them. It's not, you can't give it that title. I don't think there's any movie that deserves that title because there's so many. And then, you have categories where like, oh, it's the worst movie ever made, and it's so bad that it's good, like The Room. Mars Attacks feels like Tim Burton trying to communicate with Ed Wood from beyond the grave by channeling his energy in a way that Wood could only ever dream of, by making one of his pictures with a big studio backing, with critics in reverence of his work. It's like Burton is saying, this one's for you, Ed. And it's a beautiful sort of notion that you should really keep in the back of your mind when you're watching Mars Attacks. Hot tip as well. The 1996 CGI holds up pretty well in many of the shots, but it looks perfect when you desaturate your TV to black and white and watch it as sort of like a 50s alien invasion flick that it is at its core. Additionally, I will say this too about the characters in the ensemble. I mean, Tim Burton recruits just every actor you could imagine. You have everybody is in this movie. Everybody from the 90s is in this movie. You have Jack Nicholson, you have Pierce Brosnan, you have Glenn Close, Annette Bening, Danny DeVito, Martin Short, Sarah Jessica Parker, Michael J. Fox, Tom Jones, Lucas Haas, Natalie Portman, Jim Brown, Lisa Marie, Paul Winfield, Pam Grier, Jack Black, Christina Applegate. I mean, just what a cast, man. What a cast. And you know what he does? He kills them all. He kills them all. Thank you for the donation, Mr. Bullet. John has donated to the cause. He's bought some coffee. Much appreciated. Biz agrees. That's a good way to describe Tim Burton's films. Hit the nail right on the head. Thank you so much. Make sure you leave me skulls, by the way, and like, share, and subscribe this video. What was I just saying? You get this big ensemble. And what does he do? He kills all his characters, man. He just knocks them all off, man. It's friggin' beautiful. Like, he's like, let me establish all of these characters and just one by one dispatch them in the best kind of way. It really is terrific. And I'll tell you one last thing. Like I mentioned, it's a black comedy. Something I noticed, what happens to Sarah Jessica Parker and Pierce Brosnan is so utterly horrific to both of them. Like, it is so scary. I was never like afraid watching it as a child or as a kid the way I was watching it as a 38-year-old man. The notion of like having your head removed and then placed on your dog's body, or how about like just being a disembodied head? By the way, totally an ode to the brain that wouldn't die, the way Pierce Brosnan's head is just sort of like, attached to the gizmo, the doohickey, and behind him is his discombobulated body, just still pumping blood and whatnot. I mean, man, that is some serious body horror. it's really sad when they eventually die. Their heads, I mean, it's so sad and funny and goofy all at the same time. The heads roll to the floor and they embrace in a kiss. It's just so sappy and goofy and romantic and dark, and only a guy like Tim Burton could do something like that. So, you know, what else is there to say? Mars Attacks is on Amazon Prime right now, is I think where I watched it. And if you've never seen it before, I can't recommend it enough. I mean, just you are in for such a fun time with Mars Attacks. Okay. On to the next one. Yes, okay. Here we go. Oh, I should mention, I gave Mars Attacks. Mars Attacks gets 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, here we have another one from Shudder. This is a Shudder exclusive. It's called the Djinn, and it looks like it's spelled Djinn, but that's actually, the D is kind of silent, kind of like Django, like Djinn. That's how you do it. And a Djinn is a sort of a Arabian. I don't know if it's Arabian or just indigenous, just Middle Eastern mythology in general. Is like, you know, kind of like a mix between a genie and a demon. You know, like for instance, the Wishmaster series. Remember the Wishmaster from the 90s? That's a Djinn. That was the Djinn, the Wishmaster. This movie is about a little boy. This movie's about a little boy who can't talk, and it takes place in 1989 for some reason. I don't know why. And he lives with his dad, who works at a radio station, and he basically finds, you know, materials and you know, paraphernalia that allows him to make a wish, summon a Djinn and make a wish, and the Djinn stalks him. And just like No One Will Save You, which we reviewed last week, we are treated to a narrative that doesn't rely on dialogue in a wonderful way. Like, that was good. I was down for that. Instead, we are treated to some serious, intense atmosphere and a few jump scares that gave me plenty of unease. I think watching it alone in the dark at 12:30 a.m. helped a lot. So I was watching this by myself. And I don't know, man, I had like goose pimples. I had like goosebumps when something scary was about to happen, like anticipating it. I don't know what it was. Like, I felt a chill come over my body. I typically don't have those sort of physical reactions, but this movie definitely gave it to me. As I mentioned, those reasons why it might have. The goodwill to pay off all of this intangible dread ended up being squandered in the storytelling, unfortunately. We aren't left with much, and by the end, I was personally unsatisfied. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's a short film. It's only 80 minutes, which I like. I always love movies that are 80 minutes because, well, especially during 31 days of Halloween, because they're easy to just zip through. And I almost feel like this could have been a really great 15-minute short film. You know, like we get about as much of that, and then the runtime feels like it's really pulled like taffy. And yeah, it was okay. I gave it 2.5 out of 5 stars, you know, which is, it's 50, you know, it's average, you know, just not, it just, like I said, it just didn't really do anything. The Djinn was scary. It had these sharp teeth. I don't know. It's worth checking out, I guess. I'm sorry, I don't sound very enthusiastic. I'm trying to think of something really positive to say about it. Well, I did. I said it really did elicit that reaction. I enjoyed that part of the viewing experience. But the story just, I don't know, there wasn't much to the story. There was this whole thing with the mother, and the mother had, you know, don't want to say that out loud. And yeah, I don't know. The relationship with the dad felt a little thin. It just, I don't know, it just did not work for me. Eventually he gets his voice back, that he's wishing to get his voice, and the whole thing, there's this whole thing where he has to like keep the candle lit until 12. And, you know, I don't know. I didn't feel enough stakes. That was another thing too. So there were some moments of really, really scary bits, but it just, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it. The Djinn, it's streaming on Shudder. Check it out. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Got to tell you, it's much easier to make videos this way than it is to like shoot a video after each watch. That was such a slog. How did I do that for 2 years? I had a lot more time on my hands. That's part of it. That's partially the reason why. Okay, Meg to the Trench. This is directed by Ben Wheatley. Ben Wheatley has made a lot of genre films. He did High Rise. He's most famous for Kill List, which has a great twist ending. If you've never seen it, Kill List is must watch. He also did he did A Field in England, which is very interesting, very cerebral. And he did what's that movie where they're all in a warehouse shooting at each other with guns? I forget what that's called. Free something. And yeah, Ben's an interesting genre filmmaker. And for some reason, he was given the reins of Meg 2. I enjoyed the first Meg. It's a lot of fun. You know, most of the time, you know, every shark movie is just a ripoff of Jaws. Like, it'll never be done better than Jaws, but they can be fun, man. They can be fun in their own right. I feel like the key to making a really good shark film, or at least something that I want to see in a shark film that we do get in this movie, is more human versus human conflict. Like, I appreciate man versus shark, but like, sharks can be utilized in so many other ways. Like, the shark could be the catalyst for conflict between two groups of people. And I just feel like that's the premise that's not utilized enough. It's kind of done here. I don't think Ben Wheatley wrote this movie. He might have. I mean, we could check. I'm just being really lazy right now. Let's check. Let's see who wrote this. I don't think Ben wrote it. It was written by Dean Jorgaris, Eric Hober, and John Hober. And by the way, the other movies that Ben had, Free Fire, that's what it's called. Free Fire. I didn't know he made a version of Rebecca, the Hitchcock movie. I got to check that out. High Rise, I mentioned. Sightseers, that's the other one. I think that was his first movie, right? He did something for ABCs of Death as well. So he's made a lot of genre stuff. People love him. People love Ben Wheatley. I don't mind him. I was really happy that he directed. I was totally happy that he directed Meg 2, which, by the way, the synopsis here is an exploratory dive into the deepest depths of the ocean of a daring research team spirals into chaos when a malevolent mining operation threatens their mission and forces them into a high-stakes battle for survival. And that's what really the movie is for the first hour. And then then we get like all the real shark stuff in the back end. And for that reason, for that plot mention, this movie totally feels like it's turning into a franchise that is in the same vein as Fast and Furious. And frankly, I'm all here for it. You know, maybe by the fifth movie, they'll be in outer space. Who knows? But I mean, that's really what kind of happens. You have this and you could tell the movie had international financing, which is great. I love internationally financed movies because you get really interesting international perspectives. You know, you could tell that this movie had some Chinese money injected into it in a good way. I think it's wonderful. When movies are sort of joint productions like that, you just get such a variety of interesting actors and people. And I don't know, the movies are always like, another great example of that is the Snowpiercer, man. Snowpiercer is an international movie, and you got so many different people in that movie. It's really great. In any case, What was I saying? So here's a perfect example of mindless fun that you can enjoy without straining a single brain cell. That's right. When I was watching this movie, my brain was turned off. I kept the one thing I kept thinking in my head while watching this movie after a very hard news week is why aren't there more sharks? Like there's not enough sharks. And then eventually we get them. We get some more shark action, and when we get to the bottom of the trench where this mining operation is taking place, the malevolent mining operation, after they've done this like deep sea diving down there, and they're in these weird like strength suits, like these Iron Man type suits that allow them to walk on the bottom of the ocean. And suddenly they've opened up the Meg world, which I think is really the smartest thing to do. Because again, like I said, if they do franchise, I mean, there's so many places to go. They have like dino lizards that can swim, miles under the water, but also like walk on land. You have the Megs running around. You have these like eels, and you even have giant octopuses, man. And it's fun. It's great. It's so hard not to laugh and giggle with amusement as you watch the sequel because, he just, I don't know, he just, Ben Wheatley just like goes balls to the wall with it. He has been, listen, he hit some of his later films that we were talking about earlier. They are kind of hit and miss, man. Some of them, like I wasn't a big fan of Free Fire, and High Rise I thought was kind of a nothing burger. But I really think he's found a new groove with Meg 2, the trench. Bob Rose, who's on the channel from time to time, he proclaims, this is what he proclaims about Bruce in the movie Jaws. He says that Bruce is not a shark, but rather a monster. And so, as Bob Rose proclaims about Bruce in Jaws, these Megs are not sharks, but rather monsters that have to be fought and killed. And Jason Statham channels Arnold Schwarzenegger in Last Action Hero without a single ounce of self-awareness. So this movie is, the thing about Last Action Hero, it's like a super meta movie, even though people didn't like it at the time. Last Action Hero is completely aware of what it is doing. This movie is doing the same thing as Last Action Hero, but is not aware that it's doing it at all. And it's great. It is a parody of every like goofy action trope. The movie is so serious in its attempt to jump the proverbial shark and expands its spectrum of creatures, including the dino lizards that I mentioned, as well as the giant octopus. We do the one thing that does kind of suck, and I said we don't get the shark, and we don't really get shark action until the second half of the movie. So we lose the focus of the Meg because we're getting all this extra stuff. But ultimately, I think it's worth it. And I hope they just keep making these movies, and just watching Jason just like he single-handedly kills a Meg shark. It's so goofy. It's so dumb in the best kind of way. I really can't. I recommend this one a lot. Very much. It's streaming on Max, aka HBO, and I gave it 3.5 stars. Go watch Meg 2 The Trench right now. Just want to see real quick. Rebecca. Huh. Oh, and it's on Netflix? How did I miss this? I'm adding this to my watch list. Okay, good to know. Good to know. All right, what's next on the list here? Okay. Here we have a movie called Sheepskin from 2013. Okay, Sheepskin, man. This one's streaming on Tubi TV, and it's another one that's been in my queue forever. So the theme emerging this year is rewatches from really, really, really long time ago that feel like almost like a first viewing, and movies that have just languished in my queue for over a decade that I'm finally getting around to watch. I've been waiting to watch Sheepskin for over a decade. Same thing, just like I've been waiting to see Phantom of the Mall as well as Evilspeak. And now here, finally getting to watch Sheepskin, which is a micro budget film. Budget's $25,000. I always take note of that because I always find it to be interesting when a budget is really, really low, just to see what they do with it. Stephen Biro from Unearthed Films put out this film, and I'm really glad that he did. I love the poster art. Really like just draws you in sheepskin with the, I mean, man, you look at that thing and you go, whoa, really great painting of sheepskin. Earlier this month, I discussed my love for what are they doing with the bodies at the morgue when we were talking about Play Dead, our first watch of the year. I love those kinds of setups, and I feel a similar affinity for, is it actually the thing, question mark? There is plenty of reasonable doubt setups. So again, let me just repeat that one more time. It's kind of like what you have in the Nicolas Cage, Ron Perlman movie, Season of the Witch. Is she a witch? Is she not a witch? Like the benefit of the doubt, we're not really sure. There's reasonable doubt not to believe, like we can't tell what is actually happening. Is this actually the thing? There's plenty of reasonable doubt. In this case, those types of setups, I'm a sucker for them, man. In this case, it's utilized here when a punk band is convinced that a man is a werewolf and they kidnap him to prove it. So they kidnap this guy and they bring him to this room, this underground room bunker type place. And they interrogate him trying to prove that he is a werewolf and that he killed the leader of the punk band's sister, who everybody knew and loved. So these 4 members of this band, and I will say the one thing that annoyed me was, I mean, we didn't really get to know the punk band very well. One of the things that annoyed me, there were a couple things that annoyed me. I really, really, really like this film. I have a lot of respect for this movie. I really do. I really think everybody should check it out. It's very short too, man. It's like 75 minutes or something. It's really short. It goes really to the point. And I appreciated that. I always appreciate that. It's a self-contained, high-concept story with shades of Reservoir Dogs. So if you like Reservoir Dogs, you will appreciate this film. And it's also the perfect example of a premise with a hook that can be pulled off with minimal resources. And that is exactly what the director, Curtis Spieler, mostly manages to do with Sheepskin. So he manages to pull this off with quite clearly minimum resources. And I mean, he does a fantastic job with it. The story is lean and it gets right to the point, which I really didn't mind, but I also would have really loved 10 or 15 minutes more of character development. So even though this movie's 75 minutes, I would be totally fine if this movie was like 90 minutes and we got a little bit more, development around everybody. All the characters are a little bit more fleshed out. We learn a little bit more about the punk band. We learn a little bit more, just like everybody. Like I feel like there wasn't enough characterization, and that didn't stop the decisions being made from not feeling earned. They all felt earned, but I just felt like some additional backstory would have really further solidified it, if that makes any sense. And what's funny is that 10 to 15 minutes that I kind of was hoping of character development, it might exist, but here's the thing. This guy, Curtis, who wrote and directed this movie, he also works as an editor, and he might have decided to cut away the fat, I mean, like he might have had like a real editor's mindset and just trimmed it too thin. Like I said, the movie works. You could tell. I mean, you could tell that this dude is an editor and that he knows how to edit something. But like, I would have liked a little bit more meat on the bone. Here's the thing that I did have a lot of trouble with. I'm sorry to say this, but I have to admit it. I did have some trouble with the performances of most of the actors in this film. I'm sorry, man. And that's what happens in low micro budget type movies, man. Just sometimes the performances are just, they could be really thin, or they could just be wooden or not convincing. And in this case, they just were not convincing for me. They didn't all quite work for me as a viewer. But here's the other thing too. They didn't get in the way of my enjoyment and appreciation of the craft and effort that was put forth in this film. So it's like, it's a little bit of everything. I don't have a list of filmmakers who I would want to give $1 million to remake their micro budget films and scale it up. But if I did, Curtis would be at the top of my list with Sheepskin, hands down. I highly, highly, highly recommend anyone who is looking to make indie films to watch this movie. It's available on Tubi. So this is definitely something you got to check out. I mean, we could have used a little bit. You know what else we could have had? We could have had a little bit more werewolf mythology in it. Just like a little bit more sort of stuff that was just missing. And we get. Listen, the thing that it does better than anything else is it does the Reservoir Dog thing really, really well. So if you like Reservoir Dogs, then you are going to like this. It's like Reservoir Dogs with a punk band and a motherfucking werewolf. Great. Or is it? Woo. I gave it 3.5 stars out of 5. Check it out, streaming on Tubi. Okay. So, okay, we have Mom from 1990. Now, it's been a long time since I've revisited Mom, but it was a solid rental memory from my local video store's horror section in the early 2000s. So, in the early 2000s, I used to frequent a lot of local video stores. One of them was called Music Plus Movies, and it had the finest horror film section. In fact, several of those horror VHSs were rescued when the place closed down. They were selling them off for $5 a piece, and I picked up a whole bunch. And in some cases, those VHS are the first time I ever saw said movie was on that very VHS. So they have a very deep meaning for me. That horror section of that video store really like captures a time in my life. Like that's such like a time capsule. So like this movie, I have a deep affinity for this movie because it reminds me of that time. I haven't seen it in a very long time. Scorpio releasing, it was either Scorpio or Red Code, put this out, one of the two, put out a Blu-ray, a very overpriced Blu-ray of this film, and I snagged it up and I was saving it for 31 days of Halloween. And man, Mom is just one of those rare genre treats, man. If you like genre films, then man, Mom is for you. And not just genre films. Well, let me further clarify. Mom is somewhat of a rarity in its breed. While the monstrous element is sometimes mistakenly referred to as a werewolf, this is actually one of the very few films out there that is featuring ghouls. So to clarify what I'm saying, when you read about Mom online, often they refer to the monster element as a werewolf, and it's not a werewolf. And here's the thing: Nestor, who's played by Brian James, and you may remember him from that great Tales from the Crypt episode. He's also in Blade Runner. He plays one of the replicants at the beginning. Really intense. He always plays really intense bad guy parts, and there's definitely what he does in this movie. He plays this guy named Nestor, who turns out to be a ghoul that loves to eat pregnant women, including their fetuses. It's pretty grisly. And he says something to Clay, who is the son. He's the protagonist. He is the son of the mom, right? He tells Clay at one point something along the lines of, because Clay is trying to figure out what he is. And he says, vampire, werewolf, it's all the same. Like, trying to just leaving it completely ambiguous, and I can appreciate that ambiguity, but I wish it was more defined with a better explanation of what Clay's mom is exactly. In the end, this inconsistency doesn't affect the story or its impact. So even though the rules are not solid, like the fact that Nestor dies from getting burned, and then Clay tries to use a flamethrower on his mom and it doesn't hurt her, but then at the end she blows herself up with like a gas main in the kitchen, like, using the stove, kind of like the way Nestor died. It's very inconsistent, but it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters about it is that I just wish, like, I want to know more about what kind of monsters they are. They live for a long time and they look ghastly. I mean, just ghastly. You get a kind of a glimpse of what they look like behind the mom here. Now, the actress who plays mom, hold on, let me tell you what her name is. Her name is Jean Bates, and she's also in Silent Deadly Night for the Initiation. She plays one of the witches, and she is great. She's a great actress. And like I said, yeah, Brian James as well. And this is what the synopsis actually says. Call her mad, call her monster. Just make sure you call her once a week. So the tagline, and that's funny because I'm going to dwell on that in a minute. The tagline is, kind of makes you think that you're about to see a black comedy. By the way, this is available on Tubi if you don't have the overpriced Blu-ray. That's well worth the overpriced, by the way, but still overpriced nonetheless. You can watch it. It's streaming for free on Tubi. I highly recommend everybody watch this on Tubi. During a time when the city of Los Angeles is terrorized by an animal attack style murders, a kindly elderly lady provides a nomad with a room and board. It turns out that, turns out he's a werewolf and is responsible for the recent killings. And maybe they call him a werewolf because it just makes it easier for marketing, but he's not a werewolf. He bites the elderly woman, turning her into a hungry werewolf. She's not a werewolf. And now her adult son must try to prevent the both of them from doing any more harm. No, she's some kind of ghoul. I don't know if she is undead. Because, Nestor, he gets stabbed with some knitting needles and he like pulls them out. He's like totally fine. He even says there's very little that can actually hurt me. And I don't know. I just find that to be more in line with some sort of ghoul or revenant, a flesh eater. He's a flesh eater. That's what they say that in the movie. They say I think he refers to himself as a flesh eater. I've also noticed this. Every time that I rewatch this movie, the tone gets darker and bleaker, man. Darker and bleaker. Oh my Lord. And that's the thing, as we just read with the tagline, it's sort of marketed as a comedy, but this isn't even black comedy. Okay? It is a grim story of compulsion through hunger until it becomes an all-consuming obsession that bleeds over onto the ones you love. That's what the movie is really about at its core. And like I said, bleak doesn't even begin to describe what happens in this movie. It is so dark and so sad by the end. It really is. It really, really is. And, I wonder if the reason why I noticed that, or the reason why I'm picking up on that about, like, the fact that it bleeds over onto the ones you love. Personally, I'll be honest with you, I'm experiencing this in my personal life with a close friend who is suffering from mental illness. And so I'm watching these movies and I couldn't help but notice the toll of trying to help someone who can't help themselves and the madness that it brings. My friend, he doesn't want to get help for his mental illness, and his brain is rotting and it's terrible. And I this is a little TMI, but like, this is just some of what I'm dealing with. I don't talk about this often, but I don't talk about this at all. The point being is that I'm watching these horror movies and I see that same theme. I understand that thematic element so well. It's a theme that I also noticed in Pet Cemetery Bloodlines. And I alluded to this when in that review. If you watch that review, I alluded to it, man. It's like your loved one is either harming themselves or harming other people, but yet you're kind of like either protecting them or trying to help them or trying to, you're trying to implement short-term solutions to long-term problems. I don't know. There's a variety of things that happen. In the case of Pet Cemetery Bloodlines, I notice it more from the parental POV. And in Mom, I notice it more. It's more like, it could be anybody, could be your friend, could be just someone you know. In general, people love to slag on horror movies and B movies, but they are capable of transmitting powerful messages and great pathos when you look under the surface. And Mom is a great example of such. It's really the gore and the monster effects are great, really great, especially some of the stuff that happens at the end. Some of it is just like really just straightforward practical stuff. This is a movie that I would love to see remade or expanded on. I want to know more about the creatures. I want to know more about what's going on with you know, other creatures that are in a similar sort of situation. Like, I feel like you could tell the story 100 times and it would be interesting every single time if you did do sequel after sequel after sequel. The movie just kind of ends. It's just one of those endings, just like boom, the final thing happens, and then the movie is over. We don't get any catharsis. We don't get any real epilogue. We do get a very interesting kind of reveal, I guess would be the best way to describe it. All I can tell you is just watch this movie. Do not skimp on Mom. And I believe that's it for our, yeah, we reached it. So that was movie 17. So I've watched 17 movies in 15 days. That's pretty good. But I thought maybe I would do another 10 this week, and then I would be on track to doing 40 movies this year, which would have been awesome. I don't know if I'll hit that. I would love to hit it, but I don't know if it's going to happen. It'd be great if it did, though. What are you guys watching? Anybody else who's still watching this thing? Anybody want to tell me about what you're watching? Biz is recommending shark movies. I thought Deep Blue Sea was the second best shark film after Jaws. I'll tell you, has one of the best death scenes with Samuel L. Jackson. A friend recommended me Santa Jaws, and I could not stop giggling at how silly it was. Yeah, I've heard of Santa Jaws. Looks really interesting. I also know there's the cocaine shark as well. Yes, I've heard of Ghost Shark and Sharks of the Corn. There's also the Sharksorcist or the Exor Shark or something. It's like an Exorcist. Of course, you have the Sharknado movies as well. Oh, and Ninja versus Shark. There's no end to what you can do with sharks. Here is D's watch list right here. Week 2. Number 1, The Appointment. Oh, okay. The rating system is out of 100. Wow, that's a big one. So The Appointment got 1 out of 100. 2, you saw Saint Maud, which is 75 out of 100. I haven't seen Saint Maud yet. 3, VHS, 85 out of 100. Okay, that's cool. Dr. Faustus, 60 out of 100 from 1969. Haven't seen that. Bedevil. I've seen Bedevil, I think. 90 out of 100. Okay. I started watching Terrifier 2 as well, and everybody says that it's really good. I was not a fan of the first one. I was thinking about watching the second one. I started it, and then I just never got around to it. It's very long, and I don't know, with everything that's going on in the world, I was like, I don't know if I can handle just the first one's a mean film. There's just so much mean shit that goes on in it. I don't know if I need that in my life right now. So I'm apprehensive to continue watching Terrifier 2, but maybe I will. Maybe it's something I need to do. The Wind was boring as hell, and I almost dozed off a couple times. I like The Wind. Is that the one with the settlers? That's the one with the settlers, and like there's that weird black goo, right? Isn't that am I thinking of the right thing? VHS was not Biz's cup of tea. Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that. I really enjoyed VHS 85. My favorite VHS thus far though is VHS 99. VHS 99, really fucking good. They just get better and better and better with age, man. They really, really do. Not better with age. The more the more sequels there are, I don't know, it gets better and better and better and better. What else you got for me? Anybody else got anything else? Otherwise, we can just wrap this up. I hope you're enjoying these weekly roundups. I'm sorry I haven't been doing more live shows. Like I said, the world has just really gotten me down. I've just been barely managing to do this. Has been like the most I can do, and then chopping this up into individual clips, and that was about it. Curse of the Werewolf. It was interesting, and the way of creating a werewolf was a new one for me. I haven't even heard of it, haven't seen it. D says, I hated the first Terrifier. The sequel's pretty good. I mean, that's what I hear more often than not, that it's just the Terrifier 2 is just great. But D says it's still pretty mean though. Yeah, I don't know. I might wait a little bit longer. Maybe I'll try to get to it in week 3. I'm gonna try and do 11 movies. You think that's possible? Probably not. I don't know. We'll see. Dracula. Yes. Okay. This is in my queue for this week. Dracula Dead and Loving It, which I used to, man, I watched that twice in the theaters. Mel Brooks, can't go wrong. I'm not going to say anything about it because I'm planning to rewatch it. So I'm not going to say anything about it. I could really go for that, especially considering that we watched I watched Vampire in Brooklyn. I should probably watch Dracula Dead and Loving It. That's a great double feature right there. I think I mentioned that actually. What else is in my queue? I want to watch Dr. Giggles. Hopefully I'll get around to Dr. Giggles. American Gothic is something I really want to see. Now, I have a bunch of movies that I have on Arrow because I went a little crazy and bought some Arrow movies over the summer when they had a 50% off sale. And the problem with watching Blu-rays for 31 days of Halloween is that I always have to watch all the bonus features before I watch the movie, and it just cuts into like movie watching time. It like slows me down. I recommended Curse of the Werewolf. No, I did not. I recommended Curse of the Werewolf. What? All right. What the heck? I have no memory of this. Curse of the Werewolf. Let me look this up. Curse of the Werewolf. I think you're wrong. I would remember. Oh, the derp. Curse of the Werewolf. Of course. The Hammer movie. Yeah, with Oliver Reed. Yes, my bad. I did recommend Curse of the Werewolf. Sorry. Yes. Okay. Wait, so what did you think about it, Curse of the Werewolf? You say it was interesting and the way of creating a werewolf was new for me. Right. Okay, now I know exactly. Now it's in the front. See, this is where my head is at. I like completely forgot about that. Yes, of course I remember that. Of course I recognize that. Yeah, Bride of Frankenstein is an oldie but goodie. Absolutely. Daughter's pick was Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Great movie. Your daughter has good taste. No, I did. You're right. If you watch the last week's episode, I did recommend it. I just or the kickoff, I did totally recommended it, and I completely forgot about it. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, man, that's a movie that when I after making 2 feature films, after becoming a filmmaker, and then rewatching that movie for the first time since renting it on VHS. As a filmmaker, from a filmmaking perspective, I was so blown away by Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's a fantastic fucking independent film. It's the best. It's the GOAT for a reason. It's not the ultimate GOAT, but it is a GOAT. It is a GOAT movie. I think that's going to conclude this show. Okay, so everybody, we'll see you next week with another broadcast. I don't know. Hopefully I will. Maybe I'll get to a show in the middle of the week. Maybe I won't. Like I said, it's really hard to live stream right now. I just don't feel like doing this, to be honest with you. I just don't want to. I'm forcing myself to do this show because I committed to it. But everything else is just kind of like, bleh. More John Christ, more secret shows coming, more all that for sure. And that's it. That's all I got. So thanks for joining me. Peace, hair grease. We'll see you next week. Week number